I will now give the floor to Professor Vítor Fernandes. Yeah, you can start now. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. And very all as well. I'm sorry, I'm not able to connect to internet, so I can't show you any slides, but that's fine. You'll go as okay. And well, this is very much still a work in progress in any way. Probably more work in progress, but so be it. The title of the presentation is China as a regional, as a Middle East power. Sorry. Clearly, we're seeing China clearly increasing its presence in the Middle East, when somehow the US seems to be taking a little bit the opposite direction, although it may change relatively soon. And given this China position, my argument is that we should look at China as a Middle East regional power. And obviously, as this goes on, you will have a significant impact, I think, in terms of change in the international system. Now, to be honest and to be fair, China has had a long-standing interest in the region. If you look back to the 80s, for example, China was essentially trying to isolate Taiwan, as Taiwan was trying to get better relations with some of the countries as in the Arabian Peninsula, obviously trying to show it's an independent country, and it has its foreign policy based on showing that it still is the case. Then if you look at the 80s, with the Iraq-Iran war, China actually supplied weapons to both countries at that time. But I mean, since then and presently, what we have is a Chinese government very much maintaining friendly relationships with most, if not all, of the countries in the region, and very good in diplomatic and trading relations, in fact. Now, to be fair as well, it has also showed some interest and concern over the Palestinian cause, despite tensions in the region between some of the countries relative to that. But the most two interesting cases, and also with this one, is in fact the good diplomatic and trading relations with Iran. This is particularly significant given the US relation with Iran. Now, Iran, as you all know, is a permanent member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization since 2021. To some extent, we can argue that China takes advantage of Iran's international isolation. But as was mentioned before as well, China was also able to mediate an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran towards a normalization of relations, which is quite significant as well. Now, we can all argue that this is very much driven by energy needs, because we know China has tremendous energy needs relative to oil, relative to gas. This is something that started well before, but it sort of accelerated very much since 2013 as Xi Jinping came to power in China. And indeed, the Middle East represents roughly 47, nearly half, 50% of China's imported oil and 12% of its gas needs. I mean, for example, we have about 23% of Saudi Arabia oil exports go to China, 20%, 22% of Iraqi oil exports go to China, nearly 10% of UAE sales of energy goes well to China, and 14% of Qatari liquid natural gas sales. So it is an important issue. Energy is a major concern, and there is obviously an interest driven by energy needs. My argument is also that it goes beyond that, actually well beyond that, because in fact, China is presently one of the main trading partners of several countries in the Middle East. A lot of it has to do with the Belt and Road Initiative, obviously. Most of the countries that I'm talking about, Arab countries, are members of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and presently Chinese trade with the Arab world stands at more than $245 billion US dollars, which is a 700% increase since 2004. Now, in March 21, there was also an agreement to invest 400 billion US dollars in Iran over 25 years. Energy, many other fields as well, which also shows the strategic commitment here, and that is important to note. Interestingly as well, and very interesting as well, I think, is that apart from Iran, there's also a very close relationship with Israel. Because Chinese foreign direct investment in Israel amounted to over 8 billion between 2010 and 2019, which in fact makes China the second largest foreign investor in Israel after the US, obviously. There was a visit by Xi Jinping to Israel in 2017, and with all the improvements in foreign direct investment, Chinese in foreign direct investment with Israel and trading that took place, Prime Minister Netanyahu called the situation, and I quote, a marriage made in heaven, end of quote, which was quite interesting as well. Not sure how the US swallowed all this, but now, if you look at the products involved, we're talking about high-tech surveillance systems, dual-use technologies, but also infrastructure, ports, to mention a good example. And in fact, China is the first exporter to Israel, with over 19 billion in 2022, which I think is about double the US, which is the second one. Now, one of the issues that I think is important to note in all this is that obviously, and this is referred to by many countries, as we know, is that China does not attempt to interfere with those countries' domestic affairs, with political regimes. This obviously facilitates this establishment of cooperating relations between all those countries. It doesn't generate, namely, ontological concerns, ontological security concerns, which is also important. And looking at history, recent and not so recent, this sort of comes from what was called the spiritual socialism. Hu Jintao used to use this expression. Hu Jintao, as you remember, was president between 2003 and 2013, just before Xi Jinping. And this actually goes back to the sort of logic of harmony without conformity and uniformity. Follows Confucius, or goes back to the Zhou dynasty, which is like 1500 before Christ, and goes very much back to the whole logic of the Xiaoping, which is, in a sense, a Chinese soft power that is very different from the US soft power, namely as characterized by Zhou Enlai, that we all know. We could talk about that as well. Obviously, we have periods of China being more open or less open. We can think of the Tang dynasty in the 7th and 8th century versus the Qing dynasty, which is the last dynasty from the imperial China. You can think of the Opium Wars, the first and the second. So we have different periods here without having really a period of imperial China, if you will. Now, clearly, China seems determined to be if not the major power in the region, probably other regions as well. We know what China has been doing. And I mean, I think this is important to put in context to see what sort of US reaction we will have on the one hand, but how this will transform the regional order, but also the international order as a whole. And I thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to discuss and answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.